Saints GM Mickey Loomis recaps the 2025 NFL Draft. Ladies and gentlemen, our friend Mick talks the draft, talks everything. So there is a quote in here that I can't wait to hear where he talks about Derek Carr. Now remember, talk about this all the time, these guys are not going to come out and tell you the tea. They're not going to come out and spill the goss. Okay, you got to kind of read in between the lines. Some of it is PR, some of it is, a positive spin on whatever the situation is. But alas, Mickey talks, I listen, I talk, the people listen. Let's go ahead and react.
I felt like it kind of fell the way we had hoped in a lot of ways, and just excited that it's over too. So it feels like a long draft, to be honest with you.
That's what happens when you take 9 picks. I mean, you think about the Saints drafts of the last however many years where they go into it with 5 picks or 6 picks and trade 2 of them, or 7 picks and trade 3 of them. The fact that they held on to all 9 picks, kudos. And they made them count. They took a lot of impact players. They didn't just kind of reach for, developmental players or small schools or players that might have a raw, upside from William and Mary and Incarnate Word. Like, they got some legitimate guys out there. So probably does feel like a long process.
With you, but excited about it.
Actually made all 9 picks, no trade ups. Was that a mission?
First of all, there was no trade down. There was no trade ups and no trade downs. Yeah, you're right.
Just
so
completely
that's progress,
stayed
I guess,
pat.
in your guys' eyes.
Was that a mission? Was that something?
No, not a mission. Look, there was a lot of discussions. At times we had things that I thought we were going to do, go in both directions, believe it or not. But, either the player that the team, we thought we were going to make a deal with wasn't there for them, or, we decided that, we had a better opportunity to stay where we were. So there were some deals on the table that we talked about. I felt like in general there were fewer deals this year than most. I know for us there were fewer calls, and so it'll be interesting to see when it all gets added up how many deals were done. But it just felt like there was fewer than normal.
I think that's how it should be. Where not the fewer than normal, but it should be where, hey, business it's open. Like if the call wants to come in, take the call, see what happens. If you want to trade. If not, don't. But it shouldn't be one way or the other. It shouldn't be you're always trading or you're never trading or you're going into it with a closed mind or any of that stuff. It's good to let it play out, have the decision points, see what happens, and go from there. So I like that Kellen and Mickey have said, yeah, I mean, we took calls both ways, trading down, trading up. We're constantly having the conversations. That's what I like to hear.
Any chance you can tell us one of the players that was there on the board that made you stay where you were?
Yeah, I think no. It really wasn't a matter of, a couple times it was like, hey, do we need to go up to get one of these 2 or 3 guys that we have targeted in this area? And then, look, it looked like we were going to at least get one of them, so we stayed where we were. And then there was a couple times where we were talking about moving back because we thought that there was going to be some guys gone, and they weren't, so we didn't. And I didn't think that any of the deals were like really great value either, so they were fair, but it wasn't like a deal that we can't turn this down.
Taking a quarterback in particular at 40 was especially when we saw the Giants go up and get one, I think at 23, was it hard to stay patient when I assume he was probably the one guy at that position you were?
No, I think that we felt like that was the right value for us, and that there were some other players. If Tyler hadn't been there were some other players that we were going to feel really good about in that area. So I didn't think that when we talked about moving up for not just him, but there was a couple of other candidates as well. But we just felt like we'd have to give up too much in order to do that, and
I think
we're still going to get players that could really help our football team.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, and it's easy to do this, where it's easy to look at the pick and think it's like Tyler or nothing, right? Like Shough or nothing. But I'm sure if there was some kind of documentary done, you would see the Saints have a conversation about what would it cost to trade up and get Jackson Dart if Jackson Dart's like the second quarterback on their board. It might not have been, but just for this exercise, we'll say that. And then they probably see what it would take, and they say, well, it's probably not worth the value, so okay, we're cool with Tyler Shough or Jalen Milroe, right? Like, if Tyler Shough goes, you can't just throw your hands up in the air and say, all right, well, no quarterback for us, right? So maybe then, like Mickey just said, if you're looking at a couple of players in that range, like you're okay with, they're at 40. If Shough goes somewhere else, then are you thinking, all right, well, we'll take, Trey Amos at 40, and then we're looking to get Milroe in the third, or like those are the kind of break points and decision points that later on in the draft a team probably has. Higher in the draft, in the top 5, yeah, you're probably isolated in on like, hey, we really, really, really want this one guy. If he is not there, kind of in a tricky spot, and then the further you get into the draft, the more players you have in a range.
What is the thought process on that decision? Obviously, you probably had heard it's the highest this franchise has taken a quarterback in like over 50 years. I mean, it doesn't happen often, and how easy is it to weigh that against other positional needs?
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the process, every year. And there have been times where we've I don't want to say targeted, that's not the right word, but we talked about taking a quarterback, even in the first round, and it just didn't fall right for us. So
we all know the Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. We've heard about all that where they had the conversation. Maybe you take him here, maybe not. They obviously never did. And the reality is, I'll let Mickey keep going. I'm trying to give him some room here.
But that's just circumstances as opposed to desire, I guess is the right way to say it. But yeah, we love Tyler. That through the evaluation process, we really liked him, and he was available when we were picking, and so pulled the trigger on that.
The reality is, when you take a quarterback second round, pick 40, when you have as much unknown about the quarterback room in New Orleans, reality is you're kind of telling everybody like, hey, this is probably your starter. This is probably the starting quarterback in the New Orleans Saints. And this is an interesting exercise as a fan where you can absolutely have reservations, right? You can absolutely have questions. You can absolutely have concerns. With a quarterback, that's always going to happen. I'm sure right now in the New York Giants world, there are tons of Giants analysts and content creators who are thrilled they got Jackson Dart. There's probably a whole bunch of them that are saying we gave up way too much for this guy. Like when in that gray area of a quarterback, before you see them on the field, it's as volatile as it gets, right? And for the Saints, where there's no clear, like the Giants, with Dart, there is that security blanket of, well, Russell Wilson probably will play. Like Russell Wilson's probably your starter. We'll have a long time to see what, well, not a long time, but we'll have time to see what Dart can do. Saints not so much because of the Derek Carr controversy. So with the Saints, that volatility and that uneasiness and that concern and that doubt, that all just skyrockets. Because now you're looking at, not only are you telling me, okay, this is our guy, but you're telling me that more than likely this is the starting quarterback in 5 months. All right, where when week 1 rolls around, he's probably the favorite to start. It's a scary proposition, right? Scary proposition to turn over the keys to the castle to a second-round quarterback. And the Saints are mired in the unknown right now. First-time head coach. You got youngest coaching staff in NFL history, complete unknown at quarterback. A lot of question marks, right? Almost every position. Offensive line, who's playing where? Is Fuaga playing on the right? Is he playing on the left? Is Banks playing guard? Is Banks playing on the right? Is Penning playing on the right? Is Penning playing left guard? Right now, the motto, I think, for like the New Orleans Saints offseason and heading into the season is trust me. Just trust me. Trust me. Big trust. That's it. There's a whole bunch of unknown. everywhere. Wide receiver room. Trust me. We'll figure it out. I know it's shallow right now. I know there's some concerns. We got it figured out. Cornerback. Trust me. We know what we're doing. Okay? So with that, no doubt is going to come some uneasiness.
Inside that process a little, and just some of the things that made him the guy, and some of the things you really liked about him.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just the whole process, and you know, it's obviously it's the tape, it's, you know, the background, the interviews. I think it's a benefit when a guy's had a lot of experience, you know, and has a little maturity to him at that position, and you know, you get a player that's a little older, so in some cases, you know, that might be a detriment, but I don't think it is at quarterback. Yeah, and so, you know, I think every person that evaluated him, every person that talked with him, every person that interviewed him, and the coaches that spent time with him really liked him, and yeah, I feel really good about it.
Just when you guys were discussing trading up in the first round, did that Atlanta trade kind of change the market, the trade market a little, just how much they paid to move up? Like, does that affect who you're able to do?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, when we you know, discuss whether or not moving up, we have a pretty targeted value, and in general, we're not gonna come off that.
Just quick side note, I thought Atlanta gave up a ton. I thought Cleveland or Jacksonville gave up so much to Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland got an absolute haul. So I thought those two trades, like, we'll see how it all plays out, obviously, but I thought that was a lot to move around in those spots.
I did feel like there was a lot of teams in the back half of the draft that were trying to move backwards, so the market was probably a little softer than maybe some other years, but ultimately we didn't do it.
You hit pretty much every position group, but where do you feel like y'all are at receiver right now?
Yeah, I think that yeah, that, you know, going into the draft, we probably would. There were some receivers that we really liked, and we hoped that we'd have the opportunity to get, and it just didn't work out. So I think that's probably the one position that going into the draft you'd like to have, but when, you know, you follow your board and you take the value presented to you, and it just never really presented to us at receiver. I think there was a couple times when we thought we were going to get a receiver at a particular slot, and, you know, that guy got taken a few picks in front of us, so it just didn't work out.
How about Kelvin?
You know, I'm kind of okay with that. You know, like, it's one of those things where it's unfortunate because like Mickey said, you want a receiver, but I don't think you should ever go into the draft with, you know, like, we have to get 2 receivers, 1 offensive lineman, 2 defensive linemen, and a center. And then that's it. You're never moving off of it. No doubt about it, right? So there's no doubt in my mind that there were some decision points where it's like, do we take the receiver here? And then eventually it's like, we're not going to take one just to take one. If we've got a way higher grade on someone else, then we'll take them, you know? So can't get every position. You can't fill every hole. It is what it is. Yes, it absolutely is a question mark, just like kind of the theme of this whole thing, but I don't think it's like I would rather be in this situation with 9 great players, didn't get a receiver, than missing a great player just to say we drafted a receiver that you don't have a high grade on.
Then what did you like about him?
Yeah, look, we thought, like, he's one of the top linemen. I mean, obviously Outland Award winner. He's you know, we think he's versatile in terms of you know, where he can play for us, and you know, we just felt like, hey, we're going to get the best 5 linemen on the field, and love his makeup. I mean, love it. I got several texts from people after the pick that are associated with the program there, and just think he's one of the greatest teammates that they've ever had. And
that Kelvin Banks is kind of getting lost in the draft because of the quarterback, because of Tyler Shough, because of the conversation around him, both positive and negative, because of the clips, both positive and negative. Sidebar, you know, there's going to be clips with Shough where there's funny, goofy, gaffy, negative clips, and there's like all inspiring positive clips. Neither are right. You know what I mean? Like, if you just focus on some of Shough's positive clips, he looks like he's the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. If you just focus on the negative clips, he looks like he shouldn't have been drafted. Okay, so have fun with both. Don't marry both. Okay, it's somewhere in the middle. But Banks is getting lost. I think Banks is a smash, home run, A+, nailed it player at 9. I mean, I think, like, because he's a less sexy position, because it's a safer pick, because of all that, it's like he's almost getting thrown to the side in the conversation. But, you know, it just seems like he was a incredible pick right there. And some people have him as the best offensive lineman in the draft. Some people have him, you know, top 10, top 15, whatever. You look at what he did at Texas. You look at the reps. You look at the percentage of pressures allowed versus pass reps. I mean, it's just couldn't be any better. And then you factor in also that he seems to be, from all accounts, an incredibly high character guy. Like, leader. Kind of reminds me of almost like Cam Jordan, where he's a better person than he is a football player. And can't discredit that. So for as much conversation that's going to go towards Shough, I think we also have to remember just how good of a pick Kelvin Banks is. And one of the great people they've ever had. So we're really excited to get him. Yeah. Really worried that he was going to get taken in front of us, and but excited that he was available. You know, it's funny. I think we had 2 guys from Texas and 2 from Louisville, right? So there's a trend there, I guess.
You told us on Wednesday something to the effect of, when you're picking that high. Excuse me. Yeah. When you're picking that high, you want to have a player that, you know, will be there for 8 to 10 years, and you can sleep at night. You know, I mean, were you picturing Kelvin Banks when you were making that?
Yeah, and there was a few others, but yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Talk about a guy like Tyler. You know, you mentioned a few things you liked about him, but was there one thing that really kind of stood out about his on-the-field ability? And when it comes to his experience, do you think his experience makes him the kind of guy that could compete, you know, for the job right away when he gets in here?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be a competition. You know, we like the guys we've got, and you know, we'll just see what happens, you know, going forward.
That is a positive about a second-round quarterback versus a first-round quarterback. A first-round quarterback does come with the expectation, and we saw it with Kenny Pickett, where you got to play now. You are the starter. There is a ton of pressure and to get you on the field. And in Kenny Pickett's situation, got on the field way too early. When you're a second-rounder and beyond, you do truly go into it with a competition. I really do believe. I think Tyler Shough is who they expect to win out and who they expect to be the starting quarterback. But there is no doubt in my mind he's going to compete with Spencer Rattler, and whoever the best man is wins that job. But that is kind of a nice thing with the second rounder / third rounder / and then so forth and beyond. You have to win it. It's not where the franchise feels pressure, and like Cam Ward. Like, Cam Ward is he is a starting quarterback. All the chips are in on Cam Ward. Jackson Dart, kind of a lucky situation with Russell, but sooner than later, he's the franchise guy. And especially with the fact that they traded up to get him, because then you have even more draft capital. But Shough is going to have to compete. And I'm not factoring in Derek Carr, but he's going to have to compete with Rattler.
Going to play, is that something that you have an idea of now, or is that something that gets decided?
Yeah, you know, that's gonna be a decision by our coaches, and you know, look, we've got a long time to make that. And what's comforting is that we've got, you know, people on the offensive line that are pretty versatile, and you know, we'll let that sort itself out. We don't need to make any of those decisions right now.
Question was, do you know where Banks will play? Yeah, I mean, this is the PR spin. It's like, why would they say anything? They probably expect him to play at the left and Fuaga to go to the right, but they're not going to come out and say he will play left tackle or he will play, because that stuff can change. We saw that with Fuaga. There's no point in saying he will be blank if it works out that he plays a different position.
How do you feel like Kellen handled himself in the draft?
Yeah, he was outstanding. He really was calm, and outstanding. You know, we had you know, really good communication between him and myself and Jeff and our coaches and scouts. It was fantastic. It really was.
I think, Kellen, if you look at the draft board, you look at who the Saints took, there are obvious traits and identity points and qualities that seems like he prioritized, which whether you like them or not, I think it's important that he has an identity. And Kellen knows the type of player he wants on the team. He's not just throwing darts at a board. He's not just guessing. He's not mixing and matching. He knows what kind of a makeup he wants. And for a 36-year-old head coach, that's something you take. And I think, if nothing else, it's hard. You can't really say like great draft, bad draft, because we don't know how the player's going to play out. But just going into this for your first time with as crazy of a situation this was with Carr's injury coming down 2 weeks ago, and everything else playing out, with the Shador sliding, and I'm sure that threw the draft for a loop for a while. I mean, taking Shough probably takes you out of that conversation, but I thought Kellen at least stuck to the qualities and identifying the players that, are who he wants this team to be. And it's pretty obvious. You look at it, and he wants high character guys. He wants leaders. He wants experienced guys. He wants guys who have proven they can do it. He wants all that. So not a bad couple of traits to have your roster built out of.
He was like a veteran as a head coach in there.
My apologies.
That's okay.
After you talked to us the other day, Derek Carr's brother said, kind of went on NFL Network and talked about him and said that y'all had known about the injury since the day it happened. Now that the draft is over and y'all have selected a quarterback, is there anything else that you can publicly...
All right, welcome to the Thunderdome. Now, we covered this. David Carr got on the NFL Network and said that the injury happened in the Giants game, which kind of throws the timeline off because we've heard from Carr's camp, we've heard that the injury happened with the Raiders. We've also heard that it happened in Green Bay, and now it's happening with the Giants. So timeline's kind of thrown all over the place. You guys remember, this is $1 billion company with $100 million invested in the guy we're talking about's shoulder. So just like with a company, they're not going to spill everything. They're going to keep it to the chest. There's a lot they got to work out with Carr. So you are not going to get straight answers out of this. Our job is to read in between the lines and see if we can find some golden tidbits in the answer.
Say about that?
I don't have anything else about that right now. We'll get that sorted out.
Did the uncertainty at that position increase any desire, urgency to draft one?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I said to you guys, we're in the business of quarterbacks, and there's an opportunity to get a guy that we valued really highly, and he was available to us. So that's what we did.
Tyler hadn't been available. Were there other quarterbacks you liked potentially lower in the draft that you like? Were you said position groups you wanted to hit? Was quarterback one that if you hadn't gotten Tyler, you still would have wanted to hit it?
I mean, there's guys in this draft we like. There's no question about it. And if available at the time, yeah, I would say yes.
Reading between that one's pretty easy. The answer is yes, which means they feel like it was a position they needed to add, which kind of leads you to the direction of they're not expecting to have Derek Carr. Because if they had Derek Carr, you don't have to add, right? You've got Carr, you've got Rattler, you got Haener. But without Carr, you absolutely have to add. And if there is uncertainty that you might not have Carr, which there is, you have to add.
I mean, you obviously did not take one at 9, so is he the only one that you guys would liked in the top 2 rounds?
Yeah, I don't really want to say that.
Yeah.
There were some guys we liked, yes.
So the Seahawks, interestingly, did answer this question, where they asked, it was Jalen Milroe your number 1 quarterback, and the Seahawks said no, which is kind of wild, but you love the transparency.
Just to clarify, were you surprised by, look, it's the biggest story in the country, by the whole Shador Sanders thing and how it played out?
Yeah, I was surprised he wasn't taken earlier, yes. Yeah.
What do you like about the linebacker that you took today?
Yeah, well, first of all, highly productive, 3-year starter, a lot of juice, high character.
Stutzman is another guy who's getting lost in all this. Stutzman is sweet. He is awesome, and he's going to be awesome. And at one point, he was a top 50 type guy, top 40 type guy. Slides for whatever reason, but Yeah, that he's the kind of guy where if the Eagles would have taken him, everyone would be like, "Oh, he's the next guy." I thought that pick, one of my favorite picks in the entire Saints class.
Just lots of good things. He's the
Mustache,
mainstay
cowboy collar
of a defense at Oklahoma, and
yeah,
I think he had almost 400 tackles in his career. They're just, what's not to like? He's big and long and fast. And
okay, pause. But remember what I was saying earlier about the experience. You got Kelvin Banks with 1,500 pass reps. You got Stutzman with 400 tackles. It's pretty obvious what they were looking at.
And he's going to fit right in with our group, and he'll, I'm sure, learn a lot from DeMario and Pete, and just gives us a lot of depth at in that room, and so excited to have him.
How much was Quincy Riley's versatility a factor in your decision to draft him, and what else did you really see from him?
Our defensive.
That's something else they targeted was versatility. They targeted guys who could do a little bit of everything.
Coach has talked about that. Is that here's a guy that they think can play inside and outside, and another guy that was productive and played a lot of games, and probably a bit of a surprise that he was available when we took him for us, and so excited to get him as well. That was kind of the theme today, is that some guys that we maybe didn't expect to be available, and they were, and so that's why there wasn't a lot of movement, I think, for us.
Those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy. I keep harping on the same thing. Production, right? Production. Here's a guy that had 3, 1,000-yard seasons, and can play. He can play third down. He can catch a ball. He can protect. So I know our coaches are excited to put him in that room with the guys we've got.
A lot of guys in this draft that were captains. A lot of guys who were 3 or 4 year starters. Do you guys maybe put different emphasis on those kind of things than other teams? Because it seems like you've got a lot of those guys.
Yeah,
So I'm reading in between the lines here, and this is kind of my assumption, but if you look at Kellen, you look at his career, extremely experienced, a lot of games, a lot of reps, so it's not surprising that he puts a high priority on that.
I don't know what other teams do, but I know makeup, which is what we're talking about, that's really important to us. It's really important to us, and there are, things that we look for. Our guys, team captains, are they, have they been through some adversity and come out the other side of that? Have they, are they intelligent football players? And so I think that's one of the things, team captain. Are they good teammates? Number one, So those are things that we spend a lot of time talking about. And frankly, there are guys that we rule out because it's not good enough for us in our eyes. So, yes.
Not getting the wide receiver,
Yeah.
but the flip side is you touched really every other position on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
You must feel good about that.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, remember, if we take a wide receiver instead of a running back, we'd be saying the same thing. We'd be like, well, look at the running back room. We got to address that. If we don't take a defensive tackle, it's going to be well, you got to address the defense. So, it would have been any position left out, and a position was always going to be left out. So,
I think, yeah, yes, we do. I don't know how else to say it. I just think that when you look at our roster, we've got a lot of good players in a lot of different rooms, and yet there are there's depth that you want to gain. There's guys that you want to put in a room where maybe you've got an older player, and so you're looking forward to, hey, 2 years from now or 3 years from now, this guy can step into a starter's role, if not sooner. And so, yeah, those fall to each of those positions. We're down 2 corners from last year. The trade with Marshawn, and then Paulson going to another team. So you want to add to that room. Yeah.
Do you get the sense that this staff puts an emphasis on versatility, or maybe if not more than other staffs you've worked with, or just how do you see them value versatility in general?
I think our staffs in the past valued versatility, but the structure of the defense is just different
Yeah.
And it's like I said in the press conference the other day, it's nuanced, but it's a little different. And so I think there is a little more, at least defensively, we're still trying to, as personnel department, we're still trying to understand exactly what our coaches want. But versatility is something that.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon is absolutely going to have a defense where he's going to ask people to do different things on different plays. Like, it's not just a set it, forget it, see what happens. It is a mix and match and matchups and situations and game state and all that. And in order to do that, you do kind of have to have a pretty deep arsenal of what you can throw out there. If you just have a certain type of player that can only do one thing, well, then you're only going to do one thing.
That we've talked about a lot.
One of your defensive selections of how maybe it fits that new vision, or
well, Quincy, right? We talked about he can play inside and outside, and that gives us some versatility because we've got some other guys, Alontae Taylor that has played inside and outside, and so that's just one example.
The needs are everywhere, obviously, but the two positions you hit in round 3, defensive tackle and safety, are two that you had already addressed in free agency and have some depth there. Does that just say a lot to, those were player grade choices and not necessarily plugging immediate?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they were holes, but I would say, man, those were rooms that we wanted to put more people into. But yes, absolutely, the grades were, were a factor in terms of who we took at those spots. Vernon Broughton was a discussion about the second round, in the past few days. Prior to the draft, we talked about, hey, this is a guy that's probably going to be a second round pick, and so when we get him in the third round, obviously we feel really good about it.
what did you like about him so much?
I think again, this is part of the structure of the defense. It's changing, and also look, we have a coach in the building that's been with him, so we feel like we got a little inside information, and Bo and Brandon and Jay and our defensive staff, can look at this player and say he exactly fits what we're looking for in that position, that defensive end position. So,
Does wide receiver become a priority with undrafted free agents?
Yes.
I mean, we're
Obviously,
gonna,
yes.
we're gonna sign a few, yes. So if that, I would say, absolutely, yeah.
Become a little bigger.
Yeah, so we will. Yeah, we'll have some guys targeted in the undrafted free agent pool, and
I saw a stat that more Hall of Famers have come from undrafted free agency than from the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds combined.
hopefully hit on one. We've had some success in the past at that, and hopefully we will again.
When you said earlier that there'd be a quarterback competition, does that include Derek if he's healthy?
Yeah, I mean Derek's a starter if he's healthy, so.
You said
So that's the quote. That's the big quote going around. Derek's the starter if he's healthy. Nothing would surprise me more than if Derek Carr was a starting quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. That would be if the Loch Ness Monster knocked on my door and walked in my living room and laid on the couch. That wouldn't surprise me as much as Derek Carr being the starting quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. It is, I think, as much of a foregone conclusion as you can get. I mean, maybe we're wrong here, but I just don't see it. And I definitely don't see it with drafting Shough. If we don't draft a quarterback in the entire draft, then it's like, okay, maybe there's been some conversations had where Derek says something to the effect of, don't draft a quarterback, I'll be back, we'll figure this out, whatever. But if there was even a chance of Carr coming back and playing, drafting a 26-year-old quarterback with the 40th overall pick pretty much ends that. Because why would Carr come back to have that going on? And why would you draft Shough if Carr's coming back? You know, like, yeah, I think Mickey, and this is one of those like PR things where, yeah, if healthy, if in the building, if he's playing, if all that stuff happens, he's obviously the starting quarterback. But do you actually expect all that to happen? That's when you have to start looking at the context clues of probably not if they drafted Tyler Shough. And if Derek has yet to be in Louisiana, and you know, if all that, if it's just playing out how it's played out. I think a lot of stuff is true. Like what David Carr said. I think Derek does want to play. I just don't think he wants to play for the New Orleans Saints. I think he is working to try and play this season, just not for the Saints. And I think the Saints are 100% correct when they're saying, yeah, if available, he's the starter. They're paying him $100 million. They just guaranteed his contract. They just did all that. Yeah, but it's just not going to work out. Like everything else is just speaking louder than those things. So that would be the most shocking. It's so crazy. I can't even fathom it. I can't even fathom what I would say or do or think if the news came in that Derek Carr is at Airline Drive, he is in Metairie, and he is hitting the practice field, and the Saints are rocking and rolling, and that's just how it's going to be. And just from what I've seen other people in that space who cover the Saints, they kind of feel the same way. I think everyone would be incredibly surprised for Carr to show up, be the starter, and then you just see what happens. So I don't. If I was a betting man, I would bet heavily that Derek Carr will not be in uniform, practicing on the sidelines, whatever, with the Saints in 5 months.
Earlier, in regards to Shough, that you liked his experience and age and things like that. Is there, when you're looking at that position specifically, is there any pause or negatives for an older rookie, or does it really?
Well, yeah, I think it depends on who you are. I think some people look at that differently than others. Some of the people look at the younger guys and there's a bigger growth opportunity, and there's some truth to that. And others look, I think playing the position is super difficult in our league. And what is going to happen? You're going to have some failure. You're going to have some adversity. You're going to get a lot of blame. And so if you've been through some of those kinds of things in your past, then it's easier to handle. If you haven't, then it becomes more difficult. So there's an experience factor, a wisdom factor that comes with just going through it. And so, a guy that's last year was Bo Nix. He had 60 starts, right? So he had been through a lot. And Tyler's been through a lot, including a lot of injury adversity. So I think that can be a real asset and a real value.
Yeah, it's a unique kind of question because both answers are kind of right. There are obvious negatives. The negative is you have a much shorter time to develop. Like Mickey just said, there's a shorter growth time. Your value or whatever has to be realized much quicker because you are older and the clock is ticking. All that is true. On the other side, it's not true to be well, he can't succeed because he's older. That's not true, right? He could come in, be good right off the bat. He could realize that growth or realize that value at a quicker rate, and then he's fine. That part is true too. But it is a tricky situation, and it is a very small landing zone. And that's my concern with the pick, is much less about the player, and it's much more about the landing zone. You really only have about, it honestly is you got about half the season to get this thing figured out, where either Shough is rolling, he's the starter, you're blasting through it, he has some ups and downs, but more ups and downs, and you can kind of see, okay, we're pretty close to this thing working out, or it's a relative failure and you got to start making some other plans. And that's kind of scary. It's kind of scary to think about, right? Just making that wager, making that bet. Now, the good news is he's a second-round pick. This isn't the top 5 pick. So if it does not work out and the Saints do have to kind of eat their losses on it, it is what it is at the end of the day. And yeah, that's not great. Saying well, if he sucks, just get rid of him and whatever, and it's not a big deal and draft somebody else. You don't want to keep doing that. That is kind of the philosophy of just keep taking your swings until you find a quarterback or whatever. But that doesn't mean just keep wasting second-round picks and third-round picks and do it over and over and over and over. It's a weird algorithm because there's a little bit of truth in all of it, but you have to find that perfect mixture, that perfect balance that gives you the quarterback. So, again, I'm rooting for him. I hope it works out. It'd be cool to see. It'd be cool to finally just put it to bed and have your guy, have your quarterback, but it is a risky proposition and it's a tricky puzzle. They've jumped straight to the advanced puzzle. They jumped straight to the hardest possible puzzle to solve instead of just taking an easier route or giving themselves a little more leeway or giving themselves a little bit more room. They said, nah, we're going straight to the hardest level of the game. And so in my what I look at it is like, why would you make it that hard on yourselves? I guess if they feel like the reward is that great, then yeah, I mean, risk it. But
the injuries when they're like bone breaks and they're not like stuff that maybe has more long term.
So what was the question?
Past like some of the season-ending injuries with him, since they were like kind of bone breaks and maybe not like the longer-term rehabs.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd phrase it that way, but look, there's a broken leg, right? So that's going to heal, and there's not really a greater risk of that recurring. The shoulder and collarbone, I think, so that's different maybe than a knee or a labrum tear.
I mean, a lot of people say you'd rather break your ankle than sprain it.
You have some ongoing concerns about, and then there's other injuries that you have lesser concern about. So,
what stands out to you about Tyler on the field? What's he elite? What's the elite?
Yeah, I think he's decision making. He can make all the throws. Listen, you guys will get to. You heard it from Kellen the other day. He talked about the things that he really liked about him. So. We all like the same thing.
Not always.
Something Kellen also mentioned about is just the way he handled adversity. What stuck out to you about the way that Tyler handled adversity throughout his?
Yeah, I think we had a really good visit with him and talked about starting at Oregon and why that ended up not working out, and going to Texas Tech and then going through the injury stuff and then ending up at Louisville and things that he had to do to in a short period of time to be the leader of that team and perform really well. And it's just all these experiences and how he's handled them and how that, he talked about how that affected himself and how he felt like that benefited his growth as a quarterback. And it was impressive.
The transfer part of that is interesting. Do you guys almost have to do due diligence when players are transferring this many times now and kind of this area?
Yeah, listen, I think
you got to make some extra calls for sure.
The job that our scouts have to do is tougher now because sometimes,
100%.
especially when it's over a 6-year period or a 5-year period, you go back and you talk to a lot of the people they've been with at these other places, and so you can understand what happened, what the growth opportunity was, and how that any player, not just Tyler, any player who's changed schools has matured, and man, more and more of these guys have gone to multiple schools. We've got a number of these draft picks have done the same thing. So
when you have that volume of information, does it make it easier or harder to sift through?
Yeah, I think, look, we're in the business of gathering a lot of information and looking for what I call red flags or green flags, things that concern you and things that enhance your opinion. So more information is better.
What would you say that you most achieved with this draft class?
Oh man, I don't know yet. Ask me in 3 years.
But did you?
Yeah, that is a tough question, but I think the answer is you got your solid starters. You got proven players, leaders who've proved they can do what you're asking them to do, and now you got to see if it's transferable. But I think you got a lot of depth. You got a lot of players that I think are going to have an immediate impact.
Did you do you feel like it's about building depth or finding foundational pieces? Like what's
I think there's some of both of that there. I mean, there's I think there's a lot of guys here that have opportunity to be, starting contributors for us and good players for hopefully a long time. But that it's up to them and it's up to us to help them grow into that and give them the opportunity. But pretty pleased with the group right now.
And how important was it to have kind of specifically with Kelvin, like that foundation for Kellen's first draft, like a cornerstone?
Well, I think Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question, but I think we both believe you build, from the inside out, and offense line, defensive line, and here's an opportunity to, enhance the offensive line again. We did that last year, and man, we feel like we've got the elements of a top flight offensive line, and how long that takes to develop, we'll see. But one of the things that I think Kellen talked about when he was hired was alignment, right? Being aligned. And I felt like in this draft we had really good alignment.
I mean, that is a thing where it's hard to pass on that, where you're picking top 10 and you got a guy who is like, we could just pick him and forget about this position. Like same with Fuaga, where there is a huge benefit to that, where it's like, all right, well, we just have our left tackle and our right tackle, and now we're good to go for the next decade. That's a pretty sweet thing to be able to do,
and
if it works out.
That's part of it.
With Tyler Shough, if he plays left tackle, and let's say you guys, I know it's not decided yet, but
excuse me.
Come on, Mick. Come on, Mick. You gotta go somewhere?
If it does move over Fuaga to right, how do you think that impacts kind of his development? Like, was there still value of seeing him playing left all of last year? Or?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, we're right back to, versatility, right?
Yeah.
Tally played right tackle his whole college career and moved over to left, didn't bat an eye, and I thought played really well for, a rookie left tackle, and he was fantastic. And so we'll let that all sort out. I'm not concerned about that. It'll sort itself out. We've got a lot of time. Last one.
And again, it's theoretical, but we might not talk to you about it for a long time. But when you guys have evaluated Trevor Penning over the years, I know we've talked a lot about don't really see him as a guard or whatever, but if that's his best chance to get on the field, does he have traits that you guys have ever seen in him?
He has great traits, and I thought he made a lot of progress at tackle last year. So again, we're just going to let all these things sort out. Yeah, I think I don't know the answer to that yet, because we'll talk about that. But obviously we did talk about how do we envision this. But ultimately, it was like, okay, we're going to get the 5 best linemen on the field, and we'll see how that sorts.
Yeah, whatever combination that is what it's going to be. But I think Trevor will, if he wants, I think he's going to be asked to play guard first and see if he can.
It's out, and I don't want to get pinned down to we're going to do this or we're going to do that, because I don't know how it's going to turn out yet, and I don't think our coaches do either. Although they do have vision for each of those players.
Yeah, I think the vision is, hey, go play guard. If he absolutely cannot play guard, and the only way they can get through it is him playing tackle and Banks playing guard for a year, then they'll do that. But I think if Penning can be serviceable at guard, they'll go that direction. All right, there you go. The Mickey Loomis press conference is done. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.